back from 1920 to 1933, when alcohol became illegal in our country. What happened? People continued to drink. People went to speakeasies or underground clubs, and instead of our government making money taxing alcohol, the money went to crime lords and gangsters. Instead of alcohol being bought and sold in a friendly fashion by industries regulated by the police and government, the alcohol trade turned into a black market controlled by mobsters and their Tommy guns. Eventually, our government realized that the will of the people in a democracy is stronger than the will of the police, and they re-legalized alcohol. Eventually, the US government again started making money off of alcohol and putting their resource into fighting more important crimes. My name is Bob Kienzle, and I'm a traveling manager of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. LEAP is made up of law enforcement and legal officers who believe the existing drug policies have failed our country. They do not meet their intended goals of addressing the problems of crime, drug abuse, addiction, juvenile drug use, stopping the flow of illegal drugs into this country, and the internal sale and use of illegal drugs. LEAP acknowledges that by fighting a war on drugs, the government has increased the problems of society and made them far worse. LEAP understands that a system of regulation rather than prohibition is a less harmful, more ethical, and more effective public policy. The mission statement of LEAP is to reduce the multitude of unintended harmful consequences resulting from fighting the war on drugs, and to lessen the incidence of death, disease, crime, and addiction by ultimately ending drug prohibition. Today, I would like to open your minds to reasons why the current war on drugs has failed us, has violated our civil rights, and has cost you, the American taxpayers, hundreds of billions of dollars in unnecessary spending. First of all, the war on drugs has failed us in our country. Since 1960, recreational drug use started increasing in the USA. The will of the people began experimenting and using drugs. Some safer than alcohol, like marijuana, and others far more dangerous, like LSD and methamphetamines. Regardless of the potency of the drugs, the US government mistakenly tried to use an iron fist to curb drug use instead of a more logical approach. In 1968, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs was created, and in 1971, President Richard Nixon began the infamous war on drugs and named drugs public enemy #1 in the USA, even though rapists and murderers still roam the streets. The war on drugs has continued today. Drugs are still available throughout our country. Over the last month in the USA, people 12 years old and older, 8% of people 12 years old and older have used drugs in the last month. Last year, the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Agency, seized 49,339 kilograms of cocaine, 642 kilograms of heroin, 666,120 kilograms of marijuana, 1,700 kilograms of methamphetamines, and 2,954,251 doses of hallucinogens. This is just what the DEA seized, and it is a fraction of what is available on our streets throughout the country, and more importantly, it shows that there was still a market for illegal drugs in the US, despite decades of wasting money and imprisoning people. So let's talk about imprisoning people. Let me start with a statistic that should shock you all living in this land of the free. Even though our country, the USA, is home to only 5% of the world's population, we currently have 25% of the world's prisoners, or 1.7 million people. Now, this is not per capita. 25% of the world's prisoners are imprisoned in the USA. Now, there are many reasons for this, but let's focus on the reasons pertaining to the war on drugs. Over 60% of federal prisoners and a significant percentage of state and local prisoners are behind bars for non-violent drug offenses. Let me repeat, non-violent. And more importantly, most are first-time offenders. The average sentence for a first-time non-violent drug offender is longer than the average sentence for rape, child molestation, bank robbery, or manslaughter. As our prisons rapidly fill to the bursting point, rapists and murderers today are being given early release to make room for non-violent drug offenders. While law enforcement continues to go after relatively easy drug violation arrests, every major city in the USA has a record number of unsolved homicides. If this war on drugs continues, in the future, 1 out of every 20 Americans, and 1 out of every 11 men, and 1 out of every 4 black men in the USA today can expect to spend some part of their life behind bars in a prison. Now, maybe some of you in this room are still unsold on LEAP's goals of ending the current war on drugs. And maybe you're unsold on reformatting how we treat drugs and drug users in our country. Maybe you don't have sympathy for hundreds and thousands of non-violent citizens rotting in jail right now. So for those of you who still don't care, let me disclose to you something you might care about: your money. In 30 years of the war on drugs, our government hasn't managed to accomplish even a small reduction in drug dealing and abuse. Yet we have spent almost $1 trillion, which is a significant part of our national debt. As of 4:20 p.m. today, state governments and the federal government combined have spent $33,882,307,115 this year alone on the war on drugs. All we have done is fill up our prisons at a terrifying rate and pay homage to meaningless, meme-filled rhetoric like zero tolerance, just say no, and tough on crime. We've heard today about how this war on drugs has not curbed drug use, how non-violent citizens are imprisoned while violent criminals go to jail, and how violent criminals often remain free, and about how the cost of the current war on drugs is bankrupting our great nation. But, my fellow citizens, there is hope. Our democracy is the longest running democracy in the world right now. Many of our judges are elected by the people, people like you and me. Many of our prosecutors are chosen by the people, you and me. Laws and decrees to the police forces in our nation are started by and voted on the people like you and me. In November, California will vote on Proposition 19 to decriminalize marijuana and to tax it. Citizens in cities around the nation like Denver, Colorado and Fayetteville, Arkansas have declared that police make marijuana the lowest enforced crime . Where was I? The least important crime to be enforced. And with the education and awareness of people like you and me, and with organizations like LEAP, we can continue to reform how drugs are enforced in the USA, how we change how drug users are treated, We can decrease the amount of drugs used in the USA and cut not only the money going to gangsters and drug cartels, but also decrease the amount of money that we pay as taxpayers. I could go on with point after point, statistic after statistic, and example after example of treating drugs as a treatable personal problem instead of a criminal problem. But instead, I'll leave you with an informative handout with more information. I hope you read it, share it, and fix this problem with our drug policy. Good evening.